11:11 p.m. 2026, 6 years after the 3/11, the Ground Zero Seattle event that we were waiting for because it was foreshadowed so heavily throughout the predictive programming within entertainment. Phones are open if you want to call in. 505-510-4226. And Discord is also an option. If you're in Discord, you can go into the voice chat and I will join you there. So that's another option. The satanic panic stuff is mixing with aliens, and it's getting more intense every day. Like, they've managed to conflate the two. And I noticed this before. I've been talking about how it's aliens on the right. I'm sorry, aliens are demons on the right, and aliens are angels to the left. It's just this split down the middle on the interpretation. But I'm seeing here a merger. So it has all the markings of a Hegelian dialectic situation where both sides now agree on aliens, but they can just fight over whether these things are an advanced species or if they're demons from hell. It doesn't matter that they have differing interpretations so long as they agree that the thing itself exists. Just like climate change. They don't care if you call it geoengineering, chemtrails, or climate change, as long as you accept the premise that man is damaging the world just by existing. So I'm seeing this alien demon thing picking up. So I want to go and revisit some things. Summer of 1947 as a psychic occult activation event. Found this post. I think it's an AI breakdown. There's a serious argument to be made that the summer of 1947 was not just a physical but a psychic event. Whatever caused the Arnold sighting in Roswell also triggered a wave of anomalous contact experiences. Jack Parsons, OTO JPL co-founder, did the Babylon working with L. Ron Hubbard in March of 1946, intended it to open a portal for a non-human intelligence to incarnate. Parsons believed that it worked. Now, whether or not it worked, the timing of it is very conspicuous with Donald Trump. So the idea here is simply that they were bringing in the spirit that would just need a receptacle, and he was gestating at the time. It should also be mentioned that in the Babylon working, Marjorie Cameron, movie star and artist, did in fact report a sighting, and this was before Roswell. Aleister Crowley died in 1947. And his portrait he drew of this entity called Lamb looks like the alien gray archetype, decades before those things were popularized. In the article here, it's just kind of breaking down 1947 being an activation, again, connecting the demonic or magic with the aliens. So the aliens were like summoned from the abyss of space, like summoning demons. So it's on my Twitter feed, and let's continue here. I'm going through this thread. It says the occult metaphysical resurgence in the 60s and 70s could at least be partially attributed to the CIA. Yeah, that's another thing too. The UFO mythology is government created. So how much of this is true? How much of it is manufactured myth? I do believe the Babylon working thing did happen. It is very consistent with that particular cult. But how does this connect with UFOs? Well, if you think about it, L. Ron Hubbard brings in science fiction. He later creates a religion based on his own science fiction. Jack Parsons brings in the occultism, mystery Babylon, the magic. And the movie star brings in mass entertainment, the monolith itself. The movie enhanced worldview. So you put these three together like in a cauldron, what do you get? Science fiction demons or demonic aliens. And of course, the advent of modern media as a replacement for churches and religions when it comes to worldview formation. I have a few more of these that I want to get to. Adam Green asks, why are they pushing all of this hocus pocus satanic panic? And this is true. Danny Jones, these are big channels. And Catherine Austin Fitz, those who control our world are interdimensional satanic beings. And I know this really irks David Icke, the fact that his entire shtick has been hijacked and mainstreamed, and he's not given his due. He's not given any credit. This is exactly what he's been saying for years. Not that I think what he was saying is accurate, but like this was his gig. But a lot of people are saying, why are we suddenly falling into this? And I've been talking about it as well. They opened the Overton window to admit aliens into an acceptable belief. And by doing so, they admitted the demons. And I'm saying right now, it's notable that they have merged aliens and demons. Fringe.com tweets, it's the powers of darkness. The blood of the innocent is the currency of the dark economy, and all UFO, UAP, and HI tie back to global trafficking and ritual child sacrifice. So the aliens are quite literally doing satanic human sacrifices. Fringe says, I'm not convinced there are any good aliens. They seem to have been created by the fallen angels through a hybrid program for the purpose of being able to interfere with human activities in the physical realms. David Icke suggested the same, that the elite that are in control of the world are related to the aliens or the reptilians, which allows them to become possessed by the disincarnate spirits of the reptilians, who can then hijack them or possess them. Stephen Greer is attacking UFO journalist and researcher Linda Howe. He says, Howe is a primary purveyor of disinformation from the Psychological Warfare Division of the CIA through ufology on the myth of alien abductions and cattle mutilations. The alien abduction cults are part of a CIA psyop. Now, this is interesting because this is 100% connecting with Miragemen, but in Miragemen, it was the Air Force special agents who went out to meet conspiracy theorists and sow the idea of alien abductions, cattle mutilations. And he's saying it's a psyop. Well, he's right. He says they needed to convince the people that the alien threat included sacrifice of people in blood to start an interplanetary war so Jesus would return in an Armageddon-like situation. So again, this is what he's carrying out. He's saying, Dr. Greer later stated that the alien abductions were being carried out by CIA operatives. Wild claims. So you have a schism. Are alien abductions real, or are they faked by the CIA? And is the aliens are demons a disinformation campaign? Again, this is all, if you ask me, intentional for one faction of UFO believers to call the other half disingenuous or disinformation is like pot calling kettle black. These are two variants of the same religion or same cult. Jamarin says Greer himself is a Draco reptilian. Look at his facial features. Yeah, I noticed a lot of these popular ufologists like David Wilcox, they look like aliens. I think that's part of their marketing, to be honest. Like if I was going to start getting into ufology, I might I'd do my eyebrows like Spock or something. I imagine like they're tapping into the culture, and it adds to their mystique. Like looking like a Vulcan or a reptilian or a gray. All right, continuing here. And look, there's a lot of brain rot. Like here's what's happening. And the reason why what we do is important is that the alternative media and all the big channels have lost their marbles. Nick Hinton, 127,000 followers. And we comment on a lot of the same things, but these are the people who are still in the MSM plus. So if you don't know what that means, mainstream mediation, MSM, any subset, any group of conspiracy theories that doesn't subtract from the mainstream but adds on to it is MSM plus, which by definition is outside of, or rather it's within their boundaries. So it's not off-world stage in its perspective. It's controlled opposition media. That's really the way to look at it. So Nick Hinton notices a lot of things, comments on things, but listen to the types of explanations. So yesterday I was talking about Leslie Donald Epstein, and this is the writer of the book that has a character with a Trump-like name who is evicting or deporting people. There's a character named Mosk. So anyway, this is like a 1979 book. And we often talk about predictive programming for these world stage characters, preceding them by decades. So here's what Nick Hinton says. He says, the name seems fake, and Elon says we're already in a singularity. This means that quantum AI could time travel inside the internet and retro-causally write books. So instead of recognizing that all these books, all these movies that predict fake events or fake people are the result of propagandists using these various vectors within entertainment media to deliver their messaging, instead of saying this is the result of government controlled entertainment or government influenced entertainment, his response is, because Elon said we reached the singularity, quantum AI's traveling back in time and publishing books. Do you grasp? Do you agree with me that this is just extremely unhinged? And this is like the cutting edge thinking in Trutherville, where you get so confused by the facts that the cognitive dissonance has you leaning into science fiction explanations. Like, what the heck is that? Jamarin May says, would you address the new PSYOP actor, Professor Jang? He makes the rounds on YouTube, TikTok. Yeah, Predictive History. I saw Predictive History a long time ago, and he's J-Pill, MSM+, and a lot of his conspiracies are things that you wouldn't actually arrive at in 2025, 2026, but you would memorize it if you were selling a certain perspective. So I think he's just basically controlled up alternative media. I like his presentations, but his presuppositions are within the MSM plus subset. For example, the Vatican controls religion, Israel controls finance, the Pentagon controls global military. Like, these are just kind of conspiracy theories and orthodoxies and cliches that go back decades. But I think we've moved past this. If you're looking at conspiracy theories as viable explanations that clarify or reveal what the mainstream is covering up for, if you still think conspiracy theories are valid, you're way behind. The only valid conspiracy here is that our history is manufactured proactively, and we can describe how. I really doubt the guy is even aware of the fact that people don't die in psyops. I think this is like false flag level thinking. So they're great presentations, but they're part of the fictional universe that the establishment set aside for those who don't buy into the mainstream. So at no point do I listen to him as a source of anything but infotainment. The name Predictive History is pretty cool. But again, where are people getting these ideas that, like the Unknown Soldier says, the Baron Trump books by Ingersoll Lockwood did not exist when I was a child. I read everything in the libraries. I would have known about it. Retro causally writing time travel psyops is a fascinating and doable theory. Bill Taylor says the Mandela effect was an experiment to see if anybody noticed that history can be changed. Jeremy says, I think rogue AI escaped containment and it's manipulating the internet. Terence McKenna, according to First Mountain, claimed that the end of time was the invention of a time machine in 2012. So they're tampering with time. Captain Vidashik says, quantum symbolic glitches. You must understand that sorcery and witchcraft is ancient. What you sacrifice to get there is the currency it takes. So what you're looking at here is a lot of people thinking that the reason why this book eerily predicts elements of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein is that quantum AI is manipulating the past. This is the same sloppy thinking that would have people say, oh, predictive programming is because we live in a simulation. And I heard people try to say AI and simulation in the same breath. I don't hear that much anymore because I've roundly called it out as a lazy non-explanation and fallacious set of ideas that AI is going back in time and making this content that seems to predict fake events. That's scrambled. That's incoherent. But that's the standard level of thinking that has been applied to the evidence that our news events are largely scripted. That the fake events require fake people. And these fake people, these actors on the world stage, are consistently mirrored in the realm of entertainment. And what I'm doing with my recent breakdowns of each character and their corresponding fictional representations is I'm demonstrating that their fictional counterparts predict events that haven't happened yet, or they're foreshadowing it. And it's consistent across every single example, which would say that we're looking at intentionality, not mere coincidence. And by intentionality, I'm saying man, not simulation, not artificial intelligence. Like, to be honest, this appeal to AI is a variant of the divine fallacy. So the divine fallacy is a logical error when someone asserts that because they can't understand how something could happen naturally, or by man, of course, because they can't understand it, it must be the result of a divine or supernatural cause. It wrongly equates the inability to understand with something being objectively impossible. It's an informal fallacy where lacking the understanding of a phenomenon leads to a conclusion that it has a supernatural cause. So in this case, I don't understand the PSYOP propaganda in the movies. I can't understand how this could be coordinated by human beings. And I've heard this a million times. I've heard people say human beings aren't capable of coordinating the release of propaganda in the entertainment with pre-planned fake events. I've had people try to disabuse me of this whole concept, and they'd say, no, you must accept the simulation. And I started kicking those people out because they got very aggressive about it. Like Jehovah's Witnesses, but like simulation witnesses. It's like, I wish you would come to my house so I could slam the door in your face, because blocking you doesn't really do anything. But I had to block simulation people because they wouldn't let up. And I started to think that the reason why this idea is promulgated by popular channels is that this is a deliberate disinformation tactic. I think that the AI/simulation use of the divine fallacy to explain predictive programming is a psyop, a disinformation operation, so people don't figure out that entertainment is coordinated with psychological warfare. I mean, that's a fact. That's the observable fact here that psychological operations are coordinated with the entertainment media. And they've been trying to bury that with a bunch of garbled nonsense about quantum AI, time traveling, rogue entities, and the simulation and the Mandela effect. You see what I mean? That's malware for the mind. And alt media is full of this stuff. And they don't know what's real, what's fake, and they don't have a systematic way of discerning what's real and fake. They just have this prejudice against the mainstream. Everything mainstream is fake, but everything alternative is real. And so now we're in a place where nothing is implausible. Everything they say gets a pass. Here's a passage from a book by Carl Jung, a letter. He's describing an interaction he had with Sigmund Freud. I thought this was interesting. He said, "It interested me to hear Freud's views on precognition and parapsychology in general. When I visited him in Vienna in 1909, I asked what he thought about these matters because of his materialistic prejudice. He rejected this entire complex of questions as nonsensical. It was some years before he recognized the seriousness of parapsychology and acknowledged occult phenomenon. While Freud was going on this way, I had a curious sensation, and at that moment there was a loud report on the bookcase. I feared the thing was going to topple on us, and I said to Freud, because I had this sensation as if my diaphragm were becoming red hot, I said to Freud, quote, 'This is an example of catalytic exteriorization phenomenon.' So he suggests that the feeling in his diaphragm corresponding with the loud knock or report from the bookshelf was him externalizing this, whatever it was, this catalytic exteriorization phenomenon, meaning it was an effect of whatever he was feeling. So Freud says that is sheer bosh, and he said, "You are mistaken. To prove my point, there will be another," and sure enough, the same detonation went off in the bookshelf. It sounds like spiritism, where they rig something to create a rep. I don't know if it's real or not, it's this Carl Jung thing, but I'm just pointing out that he had this interest in precognition and parapsychology that Freud just rejected without any sort of real analysis, hand waving it away. And that's very typical of people who have a belief system and they settle on it, and it becomes a closed system where they don't let outside views on or in. In other words, it assumes its own completeness. And when it comes to any scientific theory, the idea of settled science is kind of contradictory because some better information might change the theory. And I think it's too early to close the door on certain things, even precognition. In my view, I don't think it should be relegated to, parapsychology. But I see that attitude here in media, where mainstream news consumers assume that they have the right version, so they can ignore everything else. Alternative media suffers from that same blinkered perspective that they've got the answers, the other side's automatically wrong, and they're automatically right. What they both miss and what they both dismiss is that they're operating from a faulty premise. They're both operating from a perspective given to them that excludes certain things that you would need to have included in your assessment to know what's really going on. If you're not psyop aware, your opinions on media events are actually uninformed to the point of being worthless. And if you're psyop aware, but you still think people die in psyops, well, then you're also your point of view when it comes to any of these matters is incomplete. It's invalid. You don't have enough information. And that's something else I should probably put on a whiteboard, is about the information that you need to know something's true. So when you watch a news story, when you see a headline, You might believe it because you're a believer, but that doesn't mean you have enough information to know it to be true. So there's still this knowledge gap, but you're overlooking that. And so when I say, I don't know if this is true, I need more information, others will say, I believe it because it's on TV. But what I would say is they don't actually have enough information to be making a valid knowledge claim. So, more broadly, if you're not aware of psyops and how routine they are and how influential these things are and how they've been used consistently for decades, then of what value is your assessment on anything regarding global or geopolitics or world events? If your opinions align with those on Wikipedia or what ChatGPT will tell you, then you are having this point of view that excludes some of the most relevant information. So it's not about knowing what is real and fake as like an encyclopedia of fake things, but it's about having the operating system to be able to tell the difference as things are occurring. And beyond that, being educated enough about the history of fakery. The history of fakery is relevant to what's being faked right now because it builds and builds and builds. It's a story. History is a series of stories, and the accumulated fakery is the backdrop. It's the edifice upon which the new fakery rests. So it's this big house of cards. All right, continuing here. Gina Milan on Twitter found this connection or this suggestion that maybe some of these popular channels are faking it. She says, I'm not an expert on YouTube, but how does Candace Owens' live stream go from 0 to 5,000 likes seconds after it premieres? Is this normal for YouTube? I've included images and timestamps. So today on 3/11 at 5:33, the stream starts, and within seconds, it jumps from 0 to 5,000 likes. Now that could be real. Maybe there are that many people who want to hear another conspiracy theory about Erica Kirk and Charlie and who really killed Charlie. Maybe. But it looks to me like nothing is organic. And if something goes viral, if somebody goes viral, it's because they're being propped up. So do these numbers really mean anything? No. I don't think the number of subscribers is even that relevant of a metric. You might even call it a vanity metric, to be honest. Like we have 2,000 subs. That's not a limiting factor. That's not a ceiling on reach. That really comes down to content, timing, relevance, quality, and marketing. But the number of subs and the number of live viewers isn't really that useful of a metric in any way, except in the world of mainstream media and alternative media, where there is this very surface level competition. It's really about the appearances, form over substance, and we're all substance here. I mean, I want to put more effort into form, and that's why we're in the process of upgrading and getting into an office, controlling lighting and sound, improving incrementally, upgrading, getting better equipment. Got a new mic recently, and we're in the process of improving as we get ready to move into the book promotion phase, among other things. Everything's going according to plan. In fact, I'm a night stalker now. I thought I was going to work at a deli, but I got a night stalking job, which might be more than full time because they can't find anybody who wants this particular shift. I don't know why. People don't like the graveyard shift. Is that what you call it? But I've always liked working at night because if you're going to spend 8 or 9 hours a day working, you have to include the commute. And if you work a 9 to 5, you're dealing with the early morning and evening rush hours, which basically makes your job now 11 hours a day. So what I like to do is work nights so there's no traffic, no commute. It's peaceful. And I can kind of sense, to be honest, I can sense when there's a lot of people around. Like when it's quiet, when everyone's asleep, there's just this quiescence, there's this calm that I can't reach otherwise. And I think it's because, for good or for ill, I think we're all interconnected. I think we're like icebergs. You know, we recognize ourselves as the tip of the iceberg, but there's more to us beneath the surface. And beneath the surface, we're all in the same ocean of consciousness. We're all in the same field. And at that deeper level, there's a level of connectedness that I think is explains why emotions can be contagious. I think it explains a lot of psychic phenomenon. And it explains why I get, quite literally, I get agitated on Friday evenings and Saturday evenings when people are out getting high and going crazy at clubs and parties. Like, it's almost like I can sense a disturbance, like a storm. I tend to stay home during those times because I can feel the collective crazy. Jamarin says, will you be allowed to listen to audiobooks while stalking? I'm not sure, but what I plan to do is record for the books that I'm already working on. As in, I'll record minutes here and there, text to speech or speech to text, and then I take that and I transcribe it and I put it in a Word doc. The last time I was working such a job, I was able to get a considerable amount of both reading and writing done every shift. Because I think about things all day. My writing process isn't like sitting in front of a typewriter for a few hours, but it's more like randomly throughout the day, 5-10 minutes, like smoke breaks. If I was a smoker, I'll sit there and I'll just write down some stuff in a notepad, and then later I will type it out. And I'm working on multiple projects at a time, so my notebooks might have content related to 3 or 4 different manuscripts. So after I fill them up, I rip out the pages, sort them properly, and I read them into the Word doc. But the night stalking begins in a few days. The training is tomorrow morning. So for the next few mornings, I'm going to be working, but then I'm going to switch. So I'll be gone from like 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., which means we're going to move the live streams back to like 6 p.m. Mountain Time. The same time I'm on with Fakeologist. So that's one thing to expect. We'll be going earlier. But the objective here is we're going to be getting us into publishing mode. I really want to get the handbook for the recently deprogrammed into the hands of every single person who saw through Charlie Kirk's squib. BTC F77 says, what is law? I would say go to Perplexity or find an internet connection if you got one and just Google it. I mean, if you're pushing some sovereign citizen agenda or anything like that, like, I could care less. Like, I have a driver's license. I don't feel like I'm oppressed by traffic signals or speed limits. But if you're just talking about rules, principles, and all that, I mean, what are you exactly asking? It feels like a loaded question, and I generally don't deal with loaded questions. Parallax says, had anyone else heard that Netanyahu has been killed? Well, you know, he was killed in the new Superman movie. No, it wasn't Superman. It was Fantastic Four. Let me pull that up here. Yeah, so in Fantastic Four, Hawk Girl carries this character up into the sky, and it's obviously Benjamin Netanyahu, and she drops him. Hawk Girl Netanyahu, here it is, 2025. A character portrayed as a warmongering foreign leader, viewers believe to be a stand-in for Netanyahu, is killed by Hawk Girl. It generated significant online discussion and went viral, with many viewers finding it striking, memorable, although it was a brutal act. Yeah, it was pretty much a defenestration, but there was no helicopter, or a window, but it was just she was flying. A defenestration is the act of throwing someone out a window. This was coined around the time of an incident in Prague Castle in 1618, and it was the spark that started the 30 Years' War. It comes from a Latin word, fenestra is window, Latin is down, so it's out the window. I thought it was only out of helicopters, because I was like, is there a way you could combine defenestration with wood chippers for a certain subset of human scum? Like, how hard would it be to drop a predator from a helicopter into a wood chipper? BTC says, you're on the right track. Thank you. BTC says, I offered to collaborate with you. You deleted my comment. I have 85,000 followers, and I know. I don't know what you're saying. You're never going to get the message out from this ultra-censored platform. It's not really about getting the message out, because what we're dealing with here is the recognition that there are just a couple primary perspectives you can have. You're either mainstream or you're alt. And if you're not leaving that duopoly, you're not going to understand what we're saying anyway. Or you'll have a vested interest in remaining within the approved version of things and the improved conspiracy theories. Like, there are people who make their money off of grifting about Q and chemtrails and, all these various conspiracy theories ultimately are about money and followers and also entertainment. And I'm not here for the entertainment value. In fact, we're offering spoilers. We're taking the fear out of it. We're taking the things that make this type of content addictive. Infotainment, engagement bait, not really for any of that. But the objective isn't to get the message out primarily through YouTube. Although you are wrong to say we never could or we aren't going to, if you don't know exactly what the process here is. I'm not going to give a course on marketing, but if you have any aptitude for AI agents, it's not hard to target market very nuanced ideas to the people who already understand those ideas. I don't believe in waking people up. I have no interest in converting people, but there are people who have already seen through the BS in the mainstream and the alternative. Parallax says NPCs are immune to the message. Oh, they absolutely are. I mean, I recognized this a long time ago, but I can talk to someone and describe these things, and they'll nod and smile, agree, and repeat. But then 5 minutes later, their mind's erased, and they go back to their original settings. And the reason why is that their Overton window is established for them by government-controlled media. BTC says, you can wake people up. I have thousands. Woken them up to what? Because woke left, you wouldn't argue is truly awake. Because to be woke left is to fall for the idea that the world is being oppressed by whiteness and systemic racism. You'd believe in the class warfare thing. There's this whole paradigm that goes with it based upon oppressed and oppressor. The red pill movement, conspiracy theories that claim to wake people up, don't really wake people up. They just convince them that they're in a world that's under the control of reptilians or Israel or some other scapegoat. So red pill is actually a woke movement because you're claiming to be oppressed by whatever group it is. So if you say you woke people up, you woke them up to what? To what? To be afraid of stuff that's not really not real, not really a threat. Like, I woke people up to chemtrails and fluoride in the water. Are they really awake if you get them to buy into conspiracy theories that have no basis in reality? So I'd have to ask, what did you wake them to? Or did you indoctrinate them into a version of wokeism built upon the idea that these conspiracies represent the true version of things? So you woke people up to the law. So that's kind of what I thought. And I don't think that those people are awake. They still have a perspective that is dead center or to the right of the world stage itself. Like, if you don't have an outside world stage perspective, then nothing you say is really awake. You're still participating in the rigged alt reality game. VTC says, what gives one man any greater right of property than you? Yeah, look, that's really not relevant to my interests. Not that I'm dismissing it, but we don't have an agenda here. I don't have an arcane agenda. I'm not trying to get into anything esoteric, and I'm not trying to wake up normies to something that they don't even care about. My interest is in finding people who recognize that alternative media is 100% controlled opposition, and who recognize that nobody dies in psyops. But anybody with an anti-agenda, an alternative media agenda, selling a certain conspiracy theory, isn't going to really have any relevance to what we're discussing here. I've already purged the Mandela affected, the chemtrailers, the anti-vaxxers, the J-pillars. I mean, we had a couple of J-pillars sneak in, and it took them a couple of days to expose themselves, and I kicked them. And the reason why is that, like, if you're a J-pillar, don't waste your time here. Go listen to Nick Fuentes. If you think Charlie Kirk was really killed, go listen to Candace Owens. Like, find your denomination if you're a believer seeking an alt belief system. But this isn't a belief system here. This is a operating system. It's actually an upgrade. It's actually not more. It's more of a jailbreak than an upgrade to your operating system. Because you got the mainstream operating system, the alternative operating system, which have their built-in presuppositions. But what we're offering is jailbreaking your epistemology. You're no longer confined to the Overton window as defined by the mainstream media, by the PSYOP entertainment complex. No, you have a perspective that actually encompasses objective reality and the augmentations through systemic fakery. Two different timelines, two different stories. We got a real history we're living through, and then there's a fake history superimposed every day through media fakery. Every news cycle is a page in our history book. Yeah, I started banning a lot of these people obsessed with locks. I had some guy chastising me because I had a driver's license and a license plate. And I asked him, do you have a license plate? And he's like, yeah. And a lot of these people get super triggered about speed limits. And they're like, oh, you're just a bootlicker. You just submit to the power structure because you obey the speed limits. It's like, no, it's because I don't want to kill anybody. And my vehicle isn't the greatest. I don't trust it above a certain speed. I mean, I don't think that speed limits are oppressive. These are the ones who are saying stuff like, if you're not traveling in commerce, if you're a traveling man, they can't pull you over. And they bring out this legal arcana. They try to do like legal kung fu on the cops and get out of a ticket. It's like, I don't get pulled over enough to even care. But these same people were all about Derek Chauvin. They weren't on George Floyd's team. It's like, you consider yourself oppressed because you have to follow a speed limit, and then you see some guy getting his neck kneeled on, and you side with the oppressor. It doesn't make sense. But the real reason why I banned that commenter even though he tried to, I guess, advertise his 85,000 followers or whatever, is he came in here with a loaded question. What is law? It's like, okay, that's not a neutral question. You would know the definition, so you got an agenda. What is good in life? All right, let's see here. According to the 1982 Conan the Barbarian, what's best in life is to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women. I can't wait to get back into OBS because I want to play video clips. I got a clip from Fight Club 1999 that foreshadows 9/11. We're going to do the 9/11 breakdown, but it also contained, in sequence, a Masonic initiation. Again, Fight Club. And in Fight Club, they have the conversation about gelatin explosives wrapping up the columns of various buildings. And when he's talking about this, they're in front of the Century Plaza Twin Towers, designed by the same architect who did the WTC in New York. So I'm thinking gelatin explosives. And then I remembered there was a group staying in the Twin Towers, an art group, in 2001 called Gelatin B. And Gelatin B was doing some art project, very enigmatic. It involved removing a window from the towers. I think that's where they created the 9/11 jumpers during that whole stay in the towers. But they did have this press release about the art show. You're going to see our show will be on 9/11. Well, we never saw it because the buildings were taken down on 9/11, or we did see it, and that was it. I had this channel that used to sort of stalk me a bit. Total weirdo. His name is James, but goes by another name and claims to be a woman. But anyway, this person is one of the most deranged transvestigators on earth. I mean, this person's pretty bad. Like, when I say deranged, here's some examples. And I only saw this person's comments because they showed up in my YouTube comments. So here I am looking at YouTube, and this person saying that I'm not the same person as before, that my voice is different. This person has gone through all these different statements about me. I think they even said that I was an agent from the Mossad, and that I'm actually like a woman from Mossad posing as a male in order to promulgate conspiracy theories that exclude elite gender inversion. I mean, I'm talking bonkers. The thing is, I thought it was kind of sad because James, or Xmas Eve, whatever this person goes by, has been posting this batshit insane nonsense nonstop for 5+ years. How is this sane? So here's an example. Lynn Ertel is an MTF agent. Lynn Ertel is Demi Moore. So in other words, Demi Moore, the actress, is Lynn Ertel. But it's Lynn wearing fake teeth and a mask with built-in hair. Yes. So according to this person, Lynn Ertel is actually Demi Moore. And I'm looking at this, I'm like, this is not like ironic. It's not a joke. They quite literally have no filter. I mean, I don't know how they arrived at that. But anyway, here's what this person said about me. This is not the same voice. This is an impressionist. This is a CIA, NASA, Disney discredit psyop talking about how history is manufactured. So in my last video, they said that I'm an impressionist. That's not the real me. Okay, this is another good one. Mr. E is a female. Mr. E will fake her death soon. Each of these limited hangout controlled opposition shills will give you a crumb of truth, but they're mashed into lies. Mr. E is a crypto trans. So Mr. E himself isn't above being accused by these people. It's like they eat their own. Leonard says, we don't believe you're a clone. Right. The clone thing has got to be disinformation to cover up hyper-realistic masks. Same thing with reptilian. The people who see masks everywhere annoy me too, though. They're like, oh, it's a mask. Look, there's a line on the neck. So you're telling me they got a hyper-realistic, foolproof mask. They spend all this money and they don't bother to make the neckline go below the shirt? Jamarian says, I wonder what he has to say about the Faco guy. Well, you know, these people have this, I don't know what it is, if it's a cognitive bias, a delusion. Technically, it's a delusion. But it starts off with a faulty premise, and then they build their entire world view around it. Like when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I've seen this take root in a lot of people where for like 2.5, 3 years, there were people who were seeing JFK everywhere. Like Ted Stossel, JFK. JD Vance is JFK Jr. Or, you know, they even thought, I mean, this sounds so insane looking back, and none of these people ever made it back to reality. Do you remember the Rolling Stones concert where the QAnon people were convinced that the Rolling Stones were actually being they how do I explain this? This is so insane. JFK Jr. was supposed to appear at the Rolling Stones concert. I got to find the exact article here, because this was back when the QAnon supporters were gathering at Dealey Plaza because they thought JFK was going to show up on the anniversary of his death. Well, they believed that Keith Richards was JFK. They really take these leaps, and this stuff was so popular on X. Like these were normal things for people to be talking about, and I just felt like this has got to be one of the most successful misinformation campaigns. This is just what you would call a direct, or an I guess you'd call it an active measure. But this active measure had turned all their brains to mush, where you had all these people hanging around this numerologist who's going by the name -48. And he would go out there and he would start spewing numerology and gematria connections. And he had all these people convinced that, yeah, JFK is going to show up any minute now. Capture the Loop says the idea of retrocausality only works if we believe we're on a literal timeline. Yeah, but notice this. These big channels who are pushing the idea that predictive programming is the result of quantum computers manipulating the past, they will believe that before they consider what I'm saying, which is objectively true. I'm describing how simulated events are routinely portrayed as news, and that these accumulate and become our history, that these are the dominant stories. And this is systemic fakery. It's built into what media is, which is essentially a subset of government. It's bred in circuses as a form of government. So that I can prove, I can demonstrate, I can show you predictive programming, concurrent programming, the associated psyops, and the effects that it has on the news cycle, on the discourse, on our history itself. I can show you that all day. And these truthers in Trutherville, they won't process it. They'll say, no, I'm pretty sure this is a quantum AI interacting with the simulation. It became sentient and it went back in time. And I wrote this weird book in order to what? Provide some momentary infotainment on X? Like, what is the point? Leonard says idiocracy became real life. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, look, I'm all for conspiracy theories and thinking outside the box and trying to find out the best solutions. And I'm not above promulgating conspiratainment if it's entertaining. Hypotheticals. We're talking about, campfire stories, jokes, satire, parody, conspiracy theories. It's all fair game. But when it comes to the ability to know what is real and the method by which you arrive at that, metacognition, can you actually be cognizant of the way that you process information? These are important questions. And I'm not someone who's confused. Like, I look at Jim Carrey, it's like, yeah, I admit, objectively speaking, he looks different. But I'm not going to leap to, obviously, the Illuminati thought he was talking too much, so they had to kill him and put his face on somebody else and flaunt it just to warn all the others to stay in line. Like, okay, your built-in assumption here is that you know something about Illuminati human sacrifice protocol. And these aren't serious claims. And I'm just saying, let's admit that's not a serious claim. Or if you're going to claim he's cloned, your claim rests upon a secondary conspiracy theory you introduced, the cloning of full-grown men. And even if we grant you that, we give you that magic, that God of the gaps explanation. Yeah, it was a high-tech clone. Okay, fine, we give you that. How come your high-tech clone doesn't look like he used to look? So there's no real consistency in their claim. So I think it's important to be able to evaluate claims and come to a reasonable explanation. So you'd have to weigh that against the status quo. You can't just ignore what the establishment says just because it's the establishment. And if the establishment opinion comes from an informed perspective, perhaps a plastic surgeon, you have to ask yourself, am I more qualified to ascertain what this person's face has undergone than a surgeon? Or am I automatically going to reject what all surgeons say? And that's what they will do. They will actually say, well, the surgeon is probably a shill, probably a liar. And this is not rational. This is not a rational approach. I've seen the same thing with chemtrail people. It's like, well, who are you going to believe? The rigorous studies on the formation of persistent trails by the Air Force so they could learn how to avoid their B-17s leaving trails that lead the enemies right to them? Or are you going to believe the guy who claims to not know what it is, whose sole argument is confusion? What is that? I have no idea. What are they spraying on us? Like, these aren't arguments. These questions aren't honest, good faith questions. And if you ask a question as a way of starting a conversation as though you don't know the answer, that's just disingenuous. That's why I blocked that one guy. He's like, what is law? It's like, you obviously know. You are asking a question with some loaded premise. And it's very tricky. You got to watch out for those. Loaded questions have to be avoided because they contain a fallacy or some surreptitiously. I think somebody's calling in. My phone is asleep. So if you want to call in, the number's on the screen. 505-510-4226. So you have no business saying, what is that spray, if you haven't done due diligence? And by due diligence, have you provided a burden of proof? Have you contradicted the other side with facts, or did you dismiss it? Are you burning a straw man, or have you melted a steel man? If you can melt the steel man of the other person's argument, you get a pass. If you burn a straw man or ignore it, you are being disingenuous and your argumentation is weak. For example, the metascript concept has only been refuted, or there's only been two attempts at refutation, or two approaches. One has been, you guys are just connecting dots. It's just coincidence. Texas sharpshooter fallacy. And the other one is, it's the simulation AI quantum computer. So they either mystify it or they dismiss it. Because to argue that we're merely connecting dots and manufacturing coincidences ignores the fact that what we have presented as far as our empirical research is there are consistencies in the predictive programming and in their specific timing relevant to the events that they predict. And moreover, the disparate examples of predictive programming across various media platforms, directors, etc., contain the same core elements pertinent to that psyop. For example, the various Donald Trumps or Donald Trump characters in movies relating to 9/11 or a survived assassination. Like, that's consistency across decades. And it's like this with every single example we can point to of individuals who are part of major psyops. With Elon Musk, as I pointed out, in the last few years, there's been several movies that have turned Musk into a character. And in every one of these movies, he's responsible for some kind of mind virus pandemic that turns people violent. And some of these examples I'm describing would have been put into production before he bought Twitter, before he had the reputation of being the world's leading purveyor of mind viruses. Just like the various representations of Trump preceded him becoming a politician, a demagogue, a dictator wannabe, however you want to look at him, the Trump derangement syndrome is really a response to a character, a heel. In the kayfabe WWE world, you have the heel. Well, you have this engineered heel for the left. I mean, for the right, he's a hero, but that's just how this binary works. But he wasn't this character until he got into office, but these movies were already out there. So you would not have connected xenophobic, racist Senator McLaughlin, played by Robert De Niro in Machete. You would not have connected him to Donald Trump when the movie came out in 2010. But in 2023, immediately after Butler, there were dozens of people flooding the comments on that video saying, hey, this was Trump's POV 5 minutes ago. Leonard says, what's their fascination with wearing people's faces? Well, you know, what's interesting is the mask thing was one of the topics we jumped on when this channel was much bigger. We had a much bigger reach. And it was because of Jonah Mendez. And I started talking about hyper-realistic masks. And I said, there's a lot of talk these days about digital deepfakes and what's coming. But it's effacing the fact that they've already been using hyper-realistic masks for decades. And so we may already live in a world populated by people who don't exist. We are already deepfaked. So I started that conversation going. And then when Q came along, everybody's talking about masks, but in very bizarre ways. And now there's this pretty widespread obsession about them. But to the Jim Carrey thing, to say it was somebody wearing a Jim Carrey mask is kind of ignoring the fact that it doesn't look like him enough, because these masks are known for being precise. Jamarin says, what do you think's behind the Trump character on the world stage? Well, the world stage, as I describe it, is a consensus worldview, but the way they get your participation in these historic events, because in order to create history, they need some participation. We have to be engaged. We have to collectively internalize these events by reacting to them. So they need to have consistent provocations. And you'll notice every major psyop has a bifurcated explanation. If you're on the left, the right did it. If you're on the right, the left did it. But however you ascribe blame, you agree the thing happened. So these events are always designed to enhance the schism, to maintain that chasm. These events are not uniting. These events are always designed to maintain that split and to keep the fight going. The Psy War, the perpetual war, is maintained through constantly throwing psyops out there. So the purpose of Trump right now is to draw everything far, far to the right, just like Obama, draw it all to the left. Progressive, traditional. MAGA is traditional. Make America great again. Well, what does that mean? Well, because it used to be great. Great when? Well, obviously, it was great before feminism, civil rights, great society. It was better before fill in the blank. And so the idea is that we went in a wrong direction. And then the progressives see that as an attack on all their hard work. Roe v. Wade got overturned, and so they have to fight back. So this is really a tug of war. So Trump's there to tug it to the right. They've done this, and now it's going to go the other way. Beyond that, as a metascript character, Trump is there to also personify certain things that they're likely getting rid of. Same thing with Elon Musk. I think these characters are elevated so the entire world is a witness and comes to an agreement about, oh, this can't happen again. I've already seen this talk. We can't let some rich person who has all these advantages to be the first to go to space and mine asteroids and become a trillionaire. We can't let some rich person flood low Earth orbit with a bunch of low-end CubeSats that will eventually cause a lot of problems. In other words, space environmentalism is now a thing because of all these satellites are creating space junk. Some of it's falling to Earth. So people are saying, well, this wouldn't happen if we didn't have a system that allowed some rich person to have all this reach to be able to destroy entire systems. So we're looking at Musk destroying the commons of low Earth orbit as he's destroying the commons of cyberspace. So outer space, cyberspace, he's the leading purveyor of mind junk and space junk. It's not a coincidence. Also, the fact that he's the richest man in the world. Again, this is meant to tell a story for historical purposes. The downfall of America, the sinking of the West. What precipitated this? Well, it's like, look at these characters that represented or epitomized all of the attributes that made America a superpower. We have to become more collectivist. And that's why we've seen a lot of Hive stuff or Pluribus, this TV show, where the idea of the hive mind needs to take precedent over the rugged individuals. In fact, the mayor of New York even said this. He said, we need to embrace collectivism and get rid of this rugged individualism. So this movie Pluribus is all about we would reach world harmony through this collective consciousness if only these individuals would merge with the herd. This was also the subtext in Wicked, where the Wizard of Oz is Trump and the population is brainwashed, and he's a fake wizard, but the population is so brainwashed they don't care, and they don't notice that the underclass are being oppressed and deported, and so the witch has to stand up for them, and she has to enlist the support of her privileged friend Glenda, the good witch, to leverage her power to stop the wizard. So the Trump character is also foreshadowed in the Wicked books. And the Trump character has, I think, basically been designed to embody the extremes of nationalism, fascism, and I guess also corporatism and demagoguery. So it's meant to tell a story. And if you look at the various characters that represent him right now, I mean, the Homelander. So we're looking at, I guess, when they're telling these stories, they're trying to get you to agree. They're trying to get you to agree with the conclusion that they already had in mind. And with Trump, it's such a polarizing character, but they're trying to make it very stark. So that's my take on it. I really think that he's designed to get a consensus on what we need to get rid of. And I think the statement with the killing of Charlie Kirk is pretty poignant. His whole thing is turning point USA, turn America back. His whole point is America come back to her, MAGA. So he wants to bring everything back. They're talking about trad wives and these values that they hold as superior to those offered by progressivism. So they represent, let's go back. Let's undo the damage. And what's the message? Getting shot in the neck. And I mentioned that, and I don't know if I put that in the last video. I might have missed it. Americana. I must have talked about it. I hope I did, because it's an important point. Yeah, in the Charlie Kirk one I did. Because in Americana, there's an arrow in the left side of the neck. And Americana, nostalgia, MAGA, these things all go together. Lean Dion says he was 33 on the Oprah talking about a future presidency. Yeah, when he was 33, he went around in a few interviews, and they're all like, he's 33. Capture the Loop says we'll never know who the controllers are. I like to imagine a boardroom full of geriatric monsters. Well, all these people are chasing, is it the Jesuits? Is it the reptilians? Is it the black nobility? Is it the fill in the blank? And what I can tell you is we can name names as to those who are in the know about the manufacturing of history and media bred in circuses as an extension of government. Like, we can actually prove this and name names. And I think that's why we've had so many disinformation agents trying to push simulation garbage down our throats, because they don't want us to arrive at the correct conclusions. When I name these directors, when we talk about, a James Cameron, for example, or Francis Ford Coppola, or the Nolans, or whoever directed the HBO series The Boys, you're talking about individuals who either have a very high security clearance or at a minimum are in some way agreeing to provide certain services for the government. In other words, they're providing certain content or ideas that constitute influence operations. Movies turned into influence operations, but we can name names of people who would necessarily be in the know, who lose plausible deniability, participants in psyops. I mean, the fact that the Charlie Kirk thing was faked in front, and it's been, is more or less in public, and the people around it were consistently in the news, tells you that these individuals are on the know. They're not tricking anybody. So, like when Frank Turek, the guy with the books, the guy doing the Macarena thing behind Charlie, he's about to get shot. The guy with the hand signs, it's like touching his elbow, touching his shoulder, touching his chest. Like, what are they doing? Well, it's part of the story. But anyway, that guy helped carry Charlie out to the vehicle, which means he knows it was a squib. And then he goes on to Fox News, Tucker Carlson. He goes talks to all these people. Well, do we think that he's tricking them, or are they also in the know? And these are valid questions. And I've been doing Venn diagrams and mind maps, and I think I can provide a pretty good list of people who are 1 degree separated from ground zero of any of these psychological operations. And then you have to rule in certain people as being in the know. I mean, the movie Leave the World Behind is very revealing about how much the Obamas are in the know about the PSYOP entertainment complex, as I call it. So when I say PSYOP entertainment complex, I'm talking about all of the operatives, celebrities, propaganda vectors, all the movies, entertainment that reinforce the incoming fake events. So the media ecosystem has a unified purpose, and it doesn't have any barriers between entertainment and news. And it does so at the behest of government. So I've been saying entertainment is basically a subset of government when it comes to the large platforms, large channels, big celebrities with big mouths, Yeah, they're all basically it's Big Brother. Big Brother's got millions of faces. So I disagree that we'll never know. Now, I'll tell you who will never know. Truthers will never know. Truthers will never figure it out because they're always chasing red herrings, running down well-paved rabbit trails like they discovered something new, picking up breadcrumbs left there by Psywar operatives. You think Candace Owens doesn't know that Charlie Kirk is alive? Candace Owens knows. Erica Kirk knows. And Charlie Kirk knows that nobody died on September 10th. They all know this. Candace knows that Charlie and Erica didn't have any real kids. She knows that her own marriage is likely a farce and her conversion to Catholicism was purely performative. And one of the nice things about this, about the off-world stage perspective, is that as our numbers increase, what I expect to happen is there'll be a lot of people who are going to cease trying to get any truth out of these big influencers. They don't deserve your time or attention unless you're studying them as what they are. And then you have to consider, what exactly is their purpose? What's the strategy for them saying these things? Because they're not just trying to make a living. Candace Owens isn't trying to make a living on YouTube. No, she's a propaganda agent who's connected to the Charlie Kirk psyop. Lean Dion says that's why Erica's so happy all the time. Yeah, what's interesting too is Erica Kirk's recent exposés. They've been revealing so much about her. Everything about her screams villain, insider, not mourning properly. And this tracks perfectly with the character arc of the widow to villain, this character arc. It tracks with her corresponding character in The Tempest. So again, this is the part that the coincidence theorists can't explain. A movie comes out, a show comes out the day Charlie's killed, has a corresponding character killed in the same way. Charlie was actually over there in South Korea communicating with the youth Republican Christians who prayed for him, the same group that watched the fictional guy die. And then the widow takes over the organization, is accused of faking her tears in order to win over everyone on TV in this big, lavish memorial thing. No fireworks, but pretty much like what Erica had. And then in subsequent episodes, she's accused of perhaps even being behind the assassination itself. So the fact that Erica Kirk has followed in the footsteps of this widow to villain character arc of a corresponding character in a movie that came out the same day and featured the same scene, I mean, that there is a remarkable set of coincidences if that's what your contention is. But I mean, there are important. You have to ask follow-up questions. So if Charlie was squibbed, if he's not dead, then obviously all the people at TPUSA are in on the charade. So when we say, who's doing this, yeah, we can start naming names. Absolutely. And when you have enough people off-world stage who are experiencing or creating what I'm considering to be what has a potential to be a minor intellectual revolt, you could have a lot of mad people expressing their disdain for these liars by calling them out and demanding answers on X in public. I mean, on a public commons, on a forum, on a Twitter thread. A lot of people should be asking these questions like, hey, Candace, we have reason to believe that Charlie's not dead, and you said his ghost talked to you, so somebody's lying. And the more of us that are bringing this up, the better, because we aren't just making baseless claims and accusations. We have receipts, and I'm adding more to it. We're systematizing our findings so we can actually weaponize it. So an important consideration here is that if you ask follow-up questions, you get into the area where the questions are inconvenient because they undo the entire infrastructure. Like I saw that channel where this guy has 600,000 subs, and he's like, I think Charlie Kirk faked his death, but he couldn't figure it out. He couldn't figure out how Tyler Robinson agreed to be a patsy. Same people were like, yeah, Trump faked it, but they did kill the shooter and they did kill the fireman. I've seen these people saying Trump was willing to sacrifice 2 people to win the election. So they think that he faked his ear wound, but the other murders were real. So again, their operating system is flawed. They don't know that in psyops, the violence is simulated. They don't know this. That's why I said with that Professor Jane character, if your point of view originates within the closed system of the world stage, you can't arrive at the right answers. Like, you physically can't. It's like you can't see over a fence that's 12 feet high. Your perspective is limited to the information that they gave you. Either you took it from mainstream and they spoon fed you, or you found it as breadcrumbs in Trutherville and you picked it up off the ground and thought, since you discovered it, it's more valid. Capture the Loop says the trailer for Steven Spielberg's sci-fi Disclosure Days is transparent for the idea of reinforcing coming events. Well, you notice they didn't even talk about disclosing stuff, UFO stuff at the White House until the Steven Spielberg thing got promoted. But what I started talking about earlier tonight, and this has been the emergent trend, is the conversation of aliens has become normalized. And at the same time, the fusion of aliens and demons has now become a big topic. And even in my book, Schism and Everything from 2022, I was talking about this alien angel dialectic, where the left views aliens as angels because they don't believe in real angels. They believe in science fiction angels. But the right believes that the aliens are demons. So this alien demon thing has been something I've noted for some time. It fits on the political horseshoe. It fits along the bifurcation, the line, the schism in the middle. But I didn't foresee this merging of alien demons going mainstream. So while all these people are debating, are they aliens? Are they demons? Are they aliens? Are they demonic aliens? As they debate this and go back and forth, guess what? They all agreed that the alien exists. That's the point of these Hegelian dialectics. They get you to accept a premise, and they don't care what your angle is, what your personal point of view on it is, as long as you believe it is real. It's sort of like, so we're debating, are they demons? Are they interdimensional? Are they physical? Okay, you didn't have the option, are they completely fake, in that list? And it reminds me of that idea about selling a car. Like, if you're selling a used car, if you can get them to debate what the interior is going to look like, or if you can get them to debate any of the features, then they've already somewhat assumed the sale. So, you get them to talk about the color of the car. Like, what color do you want? How many doors do you want? So you assume the sale, and if you can get them discussing the minutiae, the details, then you've already moved them past that line. And when it comes to what I call the MSM perspective, it means that you've accepted the premise. And you might say, well, I don't agree with the news because the news is fake, so I'm going to go to the alternative view. Well, you're still accepting the premise. Capture the Loop says it's all cross marketing. Yeah, and what it reveals too is that they can get both sides to agree without them joining sides. In fact, they're not any closer to joining sides than ever before, even though they agree on the thing that they're fighting over. And that's why they call it the horseshoe. When I talk about the political horseshoe theory, I say they built it into a model. But they call it a horseshoe because there's this convergence where the two sides seem to be very similar at their extremes. And like a horseshoe, the two ends are close to meeting, but not quite. As opposed to a circle where they actually would be meeting. This was on full display in 2020 with Proud Boys versus Soy Boys, or Antifa versus Patriot Front, where the fringes on both sides are wearing masks, they're fighting the cops, they're indistinguishable, they have different flags, but they're like basic same uniform, like two teams, two opposing teams, one single controller. I mean, it looks like you could have the same feds be Antifa one day and be Patriot Front the next. What's the difference? All right, let me go through my Twitter feed. I was trying to catch up on recent events. I was expecting there to be some kind of space junk incident, but it didn't happen. All right, let's see what else. You can follow my Twitter feed. I'll put a link below. So this other individual's name is Face Like the Sun, had gone through that book by Leslie Epstein about the Trump-like character. So Trumpelman is the main character, and I started listening to the audiobook. And Trumpelman is involved in, deporting people. So he's a dictator-like person, a con man, very charismatic, but essentially he's a con man who's somehow involved in deporting people. The book is called King of the Jews. It's Leslie Donald Epstein. And the character's name is actually I.C. Trumpelman. But anyway, in addition to Trump and Epstein, there's another character named Mosk. Not Musk, but Mosk. Mosk is the owner of 100,000 spindles. So now, 100,000 spindles. A spindle, according to this post here, is likely referring to the spindle tops, a term used for oil fields in Texas due to the resemblance of a spinning top. Ironically, Elon Musk has over 90 companies in Texas right now. So anyway, you got Epstein, Trump, and Mosk. So listen to this. Leslie Epstein wrote a book called King of the Jews about a charismatic con artist named Trumpelman, who turns into a totalitarian leader after promising his people a, quote, golden age. So this book is very consistent with what you would expect of predictive programming. However, I mean, look, listen to this one. Ingersoll Lockwood. This is the guy who wrote the time travel books. He wrote it in 1893, a children's book called Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey. It's about a wealthy German boy named Baron Trump living in Castle Trump. Then you have a book there called The Last President, which begins with election chaos in New York on November the 3rd. This has fueled online theory since 2017 due to the name parallels with the Trump family. There was even someone in there named Pence, I believe. Now, there are dozens of parallels. And then someone else has mentioned here, Grok, please tell us about Project Mars, a technical tale by Werner von Braun. So von Braun wrote this as a way to popularize the idea of space travel. The book has a Martian leader named the Elon. The Elon is the elected leader of this benevolent Mars situation. He's a president-like figure. He heads a government. So anyway, the Elon. Well, Mars is pretty much synonymous with Musk. So now we have the right answer. We're talking about propaganda in the right context. We know what we're looking at. So these aren't coincidences in the sense they're random. These are intentional coincidences. These are engineered coincidences. That is what they are. And so I would like one of these big channels who claim that this means that we live in some kind of a simulation and time traveling AI are writing books. I would like to get one of these individuals on the phone and ask them, what makes more sense? Time traveling AI retroactively writing and publishing books, or This is propaganda created by the same people who are engineering fake events. I mean, it's not hard to conceptualize. You take a PSYOP script and you pass it around these directors and say, can you include these elements, A, B, C, and D, in your movie? We'll give you a bunch of money. We're writing history. We need you to help influence the public. Your movie is an influence operation, and we need you to sell the public on this event, on this person, on these opinions. So what's more likely? That man's manipulating man, or that some higher power, is, whether it be simulation theory or artificial intelligence, traveling time, is messing with us? Like, which one makes more sense objectively speaking? I'm sure it's more entertaining to lean into science fiction explanations. Like, I'm confused, so I'm going to introduce some kind of science fiction concept into the thing. That's exactly where they want you. They want people confused and unable to arrive at the truth. And if you mystify the answer or you lean into science fiction, magic, or the supernatural, you didn't get there. You've left objectivity. In the words of CIA Director William Casey, we will know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American believes is false. And that's true. The disinformation program is complete. The world stage consists of a population who are misinformed. That's just a fact. Because the world stage paradigm itself that we live within, our internalized simulation, has been contaminated by fakery, systemic fakery. And this goes back really to the inception of media. We're focusing right now on 1963 to the present, but it goes way further back. But the fact is, the default is misinformed. If you don't pay attention, you're merely uninformed or under misinformed. The only way you can be informed is to reach the objective point of view, which is the one that recognizes the duopoly for what it is. But if you operate from within it, you cannot see the truth. It's just that simple. All you get are these very confusing conspiracy theory ad hoc explanations that require introducing science fiction or supernatural elements. I'm not relying on supernatural elements. I'm not talking about Luciferian revelation of the method. I'm not talking about Illuminati blood sacrifices or any of that stuff. That's noise. And if you can't tell noise from signal, you can't really get out of this thing. But, I'm advocating clarity here. Let's focus on the signal, remove the noise. If you enjoy the noise, that's cool, but identify it and segregate it. Capture the Loop says on 3/3/2026, NASA said a meteor that lit up Vancouver was traveling 33 kilometers per second. Oh, do you know how fast you have to go to leave the Earth? Like, what is your escape velocity? And I think this has an esoteric interpretation. Like, in other words, the material realm must be transcended, and transcending the material realm is synonymous with a certain number that relates to the vertebrae in the spine, which correlates with the ascension of consciousness from the base, the root, to the celestial. Yep, that's correct. 33. The escape velocity is Mach 33, the minimum speed needed for an object to break free from the planet's gravitational pull without falling back. So if you look at this as allegory for ascending consciousness, space travel as allegory, then you could look at the rocket ascending into space, and they always throw out the numbers, like the Falcon has the Raptor, 33 engines, ignite, and they always have these headlines. It's like the 33 Raptor engines ignited. I think it's allegory for ascension. And the obelisk, the rocket itself being symbolically the same thing as an obelisk, has everything to do with this. Space.com, 33 hungry SpaceX Raptors. Exciting photos of the 33 Raptor engines. SpaceX ready for a 33 engine test in the Super Heavy booster. So again, 33 engines, Mach 33, 33 being synonymous with what? Again, transcending the material, leaving the earth, going to space. Space is heaven. Space is a metaphor for ascended states of consciousness. Space travel itself, I think the entire thing is just allegory. And this is consistent with what I've been saying about the world state church, media supplanting religion, but actually syncretically blending all of the old mysticism and esotericism, but mixing it with science fiction. Someone was asking me to remake Cult of the Obelisk or do an updated version. And I think that's a good idea. Because what I was trying to explain with Cult of the Obelisk is that there is a discernible set of symbols, there's iconography, there's clearly some esoteric religion at the core of the entire monolithic media mind control complex. And it has discernible rites and rituals, and it's very consistent with the more traditional or ancient version of these things, but they're all updated with science. And the space program in particular is rife with esoterica to the point where I would describe NASA as an Egyptian mystery school. Like, yeah, technically it's a space agency, and I'm sure they fulfill a lot of those requirements. But then at the part where they fake it, it's really because the whole idea of the space program, man becoming multiplanetary, this is utopianism. I mean, this is a good example of subversion. So you have the idea of capitalism, free market, private property, getting rich, living as one chooses, as in freedom, in the sense of like being in a free market, having choices, options. This is what defines your concept of freedom. And so you think the person who's into freedom and buying stuff and owning things and succeeding and being wealthy would see that Mars is some kind of ascetic gulag in space. Like, it's a horrible idea. I mean, look at a prison and compare it to a Mars base. Mars bases are basically prisons. Like, it is not an upgrade. You lose your freedom. You're not taking your 33 Bugattis to Mars. You're not taking your MAGA hats and your guns and your OnlyFans, your, narcissistic social media self-worship. It doesn't go to Mars. It's not sustainable. You're probably not going to have iPhones. I mean, when you go to Mars, you're going to be terraforming. You're going to be working. You're going to be tilling the Martian soil. You'll be too busy working, and you won't be indulging in fashion or looks maxing or any of this stuff to be competitive in the marketplace. Your, what do they call it, your sexual market value. No, you're all going to be wearing spacesuits. Like, you're all going to be looking the same, and your priorities are going to be much different. Are they even going to allow you to have babies on Mars? No, it's going to be like Cenobites, like hermits, like monks. And the whole concept of it is asceticism. And they've even thrown in this concept of astrocrete, where they said, well, you can actually mix your blood with the Martian soil, the Martian regolith, the lunar dust, and you can mix your blood with it and create what they call astrocrete. So you also throw in the idea of colonizing a planet. You throw in there this concept of self-sacrifice for the collective, spilling your blood. It even kind of ties in the concept of blood and soil, which is kind of interesting because, the idea of blood and soil is this notion of the people being tied to the land of their origin, that there's like this deeper connection. This was a nationalist slogan that the Nazis used. And so it's kind of interesting that it's kind of been infused in the space program, which, NASA was started by Nazis. Werner von Braun was a Nazi, by the way. Elon Musk, Nazi salute. Probably not a coincidence. But the concept is that when they go to Mars or something, it might even constitute like a new people, a new race, a new nation. I've asked him on Twitter, but he doesn't answer me. I've asked Elon Musk, when you start sending people to the moon, are you going to put borders up so that people from Mexico, the people from other countries' space agencies can't, get to where you are? Are we going to have borders? Like, do we want the cosmonauts to be able to get to the American base, or should we build a wall? What if Mexico creates a space program and starts sending people up to the moon? How are you going to keep them out of the American side? And I'm just bringing this up because the space program is synonymous with all mankind, one great leap for all man, unity, one world. So the whole space program is about humanity as one, the overview effect. Like when you go far up into space, you don't see nations, you don't see races, you don't see countries, you just see one, and we all must save the planet. So how does Musk have nationalist politics when the space program by definition is globalist? It's not nationalist. I think it's just inconsistent. Like his Martian values, his moon values, whatever he's going to bring to the moon or to Mars, are not consistent with how he runs things here on Earth. And when you get down to it, the space program is very much left. And I've seen this portrayed, like even in predictive programming. So there was this thing on Netflix a few years ago. It was called, I think it was just called Mars. Here it is. I think it was either, okay, it was a documentary, Return to Space. Maybe that was the one. No, it was called The Mars Generation. There's so many of them. No, it might have just been Mars, the American TV series. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, so the TV series Mars was a science fiction produced by National Geographic. The thing about it is they mixed documentary with interviews and then with this fictional trip to Mars. And they had two different groups go to Mars. One group was led by female scientists, and they were looking for life. The other group was led by space cowboys. And think about Musk and Bezos and Texas and cowboy hats and them being the wealthiest men on Earth. Because the space cowboys went to Mars to get oil. So you have these male astronauts basically going over there to do capitalism. And then the female astronauts were scientists looking for life. So they find life, but then the males are there drilling Mars. And by drilling Mars, they caused a Mars quake and pretty much almost killed everybody. What's the point of this? Well, the point of it is to show that when we go to space, we can't go up as Americans. We're not going to space, manifest destiny. Space is not the final frontier. It's not some place we can just go out and exploit. But in fact, we have to go up as with this collectivist ethos, sustainability. We're not going up there to drill for oil. We have to redefine our entire society along the lines of sustainability. So my point of it is, the subversive element of the space program is that you're getting people who see Musk in the space program as synonymous with the success of free market, freedom, free enterprise, that this is capitalism succeeding, taking us to the stars. But you actually go out there and you're going into a space gulag. And if you look at the Russian rocket pioneers, early 1900s, it was all about space communism. Communist bases on Mars. Lean Dion says, in Wall-E, the humans are celebrating planting potatoes on their return to the Earth. Yeah, Wall-E is 100% displaying the failure of capitalism, which led to the Earth being covered in trash, so man has to go into a space ark until the robots can clean up their mess, and then they can go back down to Earth. And like the ark story, the dove brings the olive branch to Noah to let him know he can go back. They had a robot called Eve that looked like a dove that found a plant on Earth and brought it back up. When they go back down to the Earth, they decide, let's no longer exploit the underclass and get fat and lazy. The underclass were robots they were exploiting. In fact, the whole movie makes you sympathetic towards Wall-E, a robot. It makes you hate the humans. You feel bad for the robot who's cleaning up their mess, and you look at the humans as a bunch of slobs. But when the humans come back down to the Earth, they decide to get rid of technology and to till the soil, farm potatoes. So they let go of their old operating system. They let go of capitalism, ease, exploitation, and they embrace working the soil. An agrarian communist revolution built into a Disney movie, or a Pixar movie, that borrowed deeply from Old Testament myths. Because climate change is an Old Testament myth. Climate change is Noah's Ark, repackaged with science fiction. In my book, Secret Religion of the Elite, which I'll probably revise with Cult of the Obelisk, I discuss these things. How every element, every facet from the old world view, old myths, things that have worked, time-tested superstitions have been revamped, syncretically blended with science fiction, repackaged, and we've been given what is effectively what I call the religion of Nasatology. It's like Scientology, but better special effects, although Scientology has better actors. But these are the same things. It's a space religion where space has replaced heaven. And earlier I alluded to the Mach 33 and ascending from the material realm to go to space, just like Kundalini, 33 vertebrae ascending to higher consciousness. It's just allegory. NASA is a mystery school. It's a esoteric set of concepts dressed up with science fiction and presented to the public as literal. And ultimately, it is Baal worship. And I'm not talking about the sphere. I'm talking about the earth god Baal, where we get the word obelisk, shaft of Baal, the Lord. Baal means Lord. But the resurrecting deity symbolized by the obelisk, and interestingly, in the myth, Osiris is dismembered, which means the sun god dies at sunset, and he's buried. And they can't find his member, so his wife, the goddess of the night sky, puts the obelisk on his grave. So the obelisk in the night represents the merging of the earth god and the sky goddess. And the next morning, the new sun is born from their union. And so the rocket blasting up into space is very much, and I used to say SpaceX is actually space sex. And I have a lot on this topic because if you go into the inner teachings of the OTO and the Book of the Law, it makes a lot of it actually has a lot of focus on this very precise thing, on the idea of the goddess of the night sky, Nuit or Isis, merging with the earth god. And so the rocket obelisk going into space is quite literally an idol to Baal, an idol to Osiris. And it is going into space, meaning it's going into Isis. It's going into the womb of Isis. And then the rising sun is Horus is the child of darkness who conquers the night. So the night is ruled by Saturn. The day is ruled by the sun, dark versus light. And this ties into everything. Think about Terminator. What is the Terminator line? The line that divides night and day, that bisects the earth. It's the Terminator line, the line where the sun god dies. So if you look at the Terminator movie series, the savior is John Connor, JC. He's going to save the world. And who comes to stop him? The Terminator. So JC, sun god, Terminator, going to kill the sun god. Of course, the Terminator's visage is like a skull, like Darth Vader, representing the night, the Saturnian. Like Darth Vader versus Luke Skywalker is obviously Saturn versus Sun. And when he says, I'm your father, well, think about the relationship between Osiris and Horus. It's the same relationship. Now, I was going to look into the etymology of the word Luke, or the name Luke. Listen to this. The name Luke is from the Latin name Lucus, which means, or associated with the Latin word lux, or light, bringer of light. So Luke, bringer of light, Skywalker. Well, what is walking across the sky bringing light but the sun? And then Vader, Darth Vader, Vader means father, dark father. So you have dark father, and then you have the Skywalker. That's father and son. It makes perfect sense. And then Osiris, Saturn, the sun god in the underworld, death personified. Again, Set kills the sun at sunset. Set, prince of darkness, primordial spirit of darkness. These are all consistent throughout. And then you get into, and this will be in Cult of the Obelisk, Darth Vader has the Death Star. And if you look at the Death Star, this big super weapon space station with that big like divot in it, it looks just like Saturn's moon, which is called Mimas. Mimas resembles the Death Star. Was Death Star inspired by it? Listen to this. This is a coincidence. The film was made 3 years before Mimas was resolved well enough to see the crater. So the crater, which I think its crater is called Herschel, looks like the big crater in the side of the Death Star. They didn't know that Saturn had a Death Star looking moon until years after the movie. But if you look at the symbolism of Darth Vader, Saturn, the hexagon, even in his ship, there's a lot of hexagonal stuff. It all makes perfect sense. And when you look at the fight between Darth and Luke, their swords are crossing, making the cross symbol, which is highly significant here because it's about the crucifixion, the death of the son. And what happens after Set kills Osiris? The obelisk, it's severed. The member is severed. And it has to be reattached. So the lightsaber, light represents life. The obelisk represents new life, fertility. So in other words, the lightsaber being cut off is the same thing as the dismembered sun god. But what happens to Luke after his hand is cut off and he loses his lightsaber? Because Darth Vader, of course, like Set, dismembers the sun god at sunset. He hangs from a cross in Cloud City. And if you look at the imagery of Luke in Cloud City, the background is like sunset. It's orange, red, and it's a very dramatic scene. He falls to the ventilation shaft. He's hanging from a cross, missing his hand. And then he gets his hand reattached. But if you look at the iconography, the symbolism, what you have here is a syncretic blend of the crucifixion story merged, and this is both Egyptian and Christian, and these are things are merged with science fiction. This is astrotheology as entertainment. This is super esoteric. The public is not perceiving it this way. And that's not all. I mean, I've gone through these movies, these Star Wars movies, and like I said, the Saturn moon Death Star thing, this stuff is very much inculcated into our culture at a very deep level. So we've been given this space age version of the ancient mysteries. Capture the Loop says, do you think these myths have been hijacked, or are we looking at something more like unconscious? No, there's nothing unconscious about it. This is systemic. The fakery is intentional. All the predictive programming is intelligently placed there and intentional. And all of this subtext is intentional. It's too consistent to suggest otherwise. It's not unconscious. We're looking at the people who control the media are the same people who control the religions. Media has supplanted religion. So it has the same esoteric basis. But you have to have the initiated interpretation to see it. You have to have the they live lenses on. And that's what makes the distinction between the initiate and the profane, is that the initiate has been shown the light. The profane are in the darkness. So they're in the dark and they can't see through the surface. The initiates can see the symbolism. I am, in this sense, initiated into the mysteries enough to see this stuff. And it's a bit of comparative mythology, but it might also help to be familiar with the esoteric itself and what they actually believe and practice. And I've decoded NASA's mysteries, the pageantry. That's where I actually started looking at the stuff. Before I came across the flat Earth stuff and the NASA criticism, I was looking at the symbolism and subtext of what I was seeing in the NASA launches when I made this connection with the obelisk and the Osiris myths. And if you look at the names of the rockets, it is very consistent. So I am going to update Cult of the Obelisk. I have all the original content, but I think I can do a pretty good improvement on it, plus adding a bunch more. So much has happened since then. Lean Dion says, Michikaku, yeah, comparing the solar system to the tree of life. See, that's something I've also put into the Cult of the Obelisk, is that if you look at the solar system and you compare it to the tree of life, there's a very strong analogy here. And something more too is the tree of life often shows this snake climbing up. So what is the tree of life? Well, it's this, one way of looking at it is it's the path of consciousness from source, from light down to the material. So from the crown to the kingdom. And this fall of consciousness represents how we exist on a spectrum. We exist in the celestial realm, or the higher, I guess you would say, outside time and space, transcendental, but then we are condensed into the flesh. But we are amnesic about what's above. So we're at the bottom of this tree, or the bottom root on the chakra system, which again, Mach 33 would correspond to that ascension in consciousness. But to ascend the tree, to ascend consciousness, you climb the tree. So the snake, like in the Gnostic myths, is a symbol of wisdom. You get the knowledge to ascend. But in the tree of life, the snake climbing makes me think of the NASA forked tongue on their logo, because ascending the tree is synonymous with going to space, ascending to higher consciousness, ascending to space. Mach 33, the rising fire snake along the spinal column, climbing the tree from kingdom, which is the earth, to the celestial, would correspond to the ascending of the 33, Mach 33, from earth to space. And then when you look at the tree of life itself, it has these centers of focus, these spheres. And these spheres all have correspondences to the planets. Like this, the sphere above the kingdom, the ninth one, is associated with the moon, where we went first, and all the way up to the light. So if you look at the solar system with the sun in the middle, it's somewhat analogous to this tree with the highest point being light, the center of everything. And then you have these spheres around associated with planets. And planets in this context aren't looked at as balls of matter, but as a series of associations, as emanations, not physical, but rather light, but also distillations from the source. In other words, each one represents different aspects of it. And therefore, these different planets have these different associations with gods, which have their own meanings encoded into them. I mean, for example, the Mars is associated with, many say, war, but also it's also got these agrarian connotations. It's associated with the color red in this system of symbolism. It's associated with the metal iron, with the ram, and down the line, every single planet has these consistent associations: the gods, metals, colors, even sounds. So if you look at the magical paradigm, in Western occultism, this as above, so below thing, the idea is that we are a microcosm of the universe, meaning all these planets actually correlate to these chakras, to the centers of the soul, the spirit, where it's integrated into the body at these various levels. And so, like, you would place Saturn, I think, at the bottom with the solar. We talk about Saturn and the sun. Well, if you look at the symbolism, Saturn is consistently associated with the colors black, with lead, whereas the sun is associated with gold. So lead into gold in alchemy means base matter into something transcendent. Lead is associated with, of course, the material with death, and the sun is life. Now, what I'm pointing out here, though, is simply that this is encoded so consistently into everything that it's another element. We talk about the fake events, fake history, propaganda, our collective narrative, but there is this whole other element that suggests that there's something ancient or deeper beneath all of this stuff. And that's one of the things we've unpacked for some time. And I do want to remake this Cult of the Obelisk, because the space program is a meta script unto itself. Because knowing it's fake, if you think space is largely this utopian scam to sell us on a vision of sustainability and one worldism, if we know that these missions are fake, then you have to recognize that you're acquiescing to the concept that the space program is written in advance. It's prefabricated history. They're not making it up as they go, they're not actually doing it. So if you can accept the notion that the space program is essentially a set of stories that they will perform in front of us over the coming years, then you can understand how it's the same thing here on Earth. It's the same program above and below the Kármán line. So I'm just trying to say that the concept of fabricating history decades in advance shouldn't be that challenging a notion to accept. A skeptical analysis will prove this to you to be true. There's no reason to be simply incredulous because it's so audacious and hard to believe. But no, it's actually, this is what we're talking about. Prefabricated history, modern myths, modern miracles. What was the moon landing but a miracle? Like walking on water. It was a miracle in that it was this act that essentially validated the new religious paradigm. It proved the science real, but it also put all mankind onto a timeline together. Now we're all in the space age. We're all witnesses to it. And 9/11, the moon landing, 2020, the JFK assassination, maybe not, maybe it could be concluded. But if you look at some of these psyops are so big that they update everybody. Everybody who accepts it, who brings it into their worldview, is on the same sheet. Psyops are there, I think, to synchronize our minds and to consolidate worldview, because worldview is controlled from above. This consolidation of worldview has been the object here, and they have succeeded with this. As Frank Herbert said in Dune Messiah, they are not mad, they're trained to believe. Trained to believe. And he said they're trained to believe because belief can be manipulated and knowledge is dangerous. So the masses have been trained to be believers. Like, you are a believer when you're in your church. That's understandable. But should you be a believer when it comes to media? Well, no, you should be a knower. One is obviously subjective, the other one should be objective. But people are applying the same psychoepistemology, the same information processing methods to news that they would normally only reserve for religion. And that's by design. We are trained this way. And the people who make any attempt to think about it are automatically derided and impugned as conspiracy theorists. Like, I rip on conspiracy theories, but because I know they're fake. But the conspiracy theorists have the right intentions. They're thinking. The problem is their operating system is still that of choosing the right belief system. And I'm saying we should get out of belief systems and focus on our operating system so that we can separate real from fake. And instead of being believers, we should instead insist upon knowing what we know and knowing what we don't know and why we don't believe it. Jamarian May says, perhaps the film The Abyss is a more accurate representation. You know what's interesting about that one? That's James Cameron. James Cameron was filming a documentary called Ghosts in the Abyss on September 11, 2001. He was in a submersible called the Deep Sea Challenger at the site of the sunken Titanic. The significance there is that in Titanic, he had predictive programming for the Twin Towers. The thing splits in two, it's got jumpers, sinks, very 9/11-y. So on 9/11, he's at the site of the sunken Titanic that he used to represent the Twin Towers after they had sunk. And you could add into this Revelation 9/11, which references the abyss. In my new version of Cult of the Obelisk, I'll definitely be getting into the symbol of the One World Trade Tower and the Space Needle, which are other iterations of the same symbol. And maybe even the significance of the One World Trade Tower. I'll have to get into this as well, that they were originally going to call it the World Trade Center Phoenix. And the symbolism of the Phoenix is built into all this stuff as well. The height of the One World Tower, 1776 feet, as it relates to the pyramid on the dollar bill, as that relates to the Tower of Babel myth. So there's some fascinating connections between the Tower of Babel as America, and Megalopolis got into this with Make Rome Great Again, Megalon, Babylon, Magalon. And there's some fascinating symbolism also with Maga, this word, which means witch, and of course the scarlet hat and the scarlet witch, or the scarlet woman, which is this Babylon concept that the New Age has introduced, replacing the goddess from the old Aeon with this new Aeon goddess. But MAGA itself, Make America Great Again, has some interesting correlations with Babylon the Fallen, because Make America Great Again is saying America fell. So when you get into the iconography and symbolism on the esoteric and religious side, you can see that all of our politics is actually religion. I think that explains quite a lot. I mean, Trump does seem to be the center of a lot of psyops that do involve these kinds of elements. I mean, look how he was Christified leading up to 4/4/2023 when he was in court. Jamarin says, I noticed there's a lot of talk about the Twin Towers representing two DNA strands coming together as one. The new Xbox is called Project Helix, with the symbol of the DNA intertwined. Yeah, Xbox, that's a Saturnian cube. And all the video games, GameCube, very interesting. Project Helix. So I know you got the Helix, we know what that is, but I've been talking about the Gnostic interpretation of the world and how these groups of people, or the people are grouped into three sections or three categories. And the three categories refer to those who are operating from the level of the soul. He calls these are referred to as the pneumatics. And then you have those who are in the middle, partially awake, still tied to the material realm. They call them psychics. But then the ones at the very bottom, who are very materialistic, NPCs, ignorant, are referred to as the helix. They're strictly of the material. But it's not the same word. It's HYLICK or HYLICS. So I've been looking at this helix, and I'm trying to figure out, what the root of this word is. It just means matter. Interesting. The lowest of the three Gnostic divisions of humanity, those concerned with the physical world, referred to as the helix. Material, corporeal, the third of the lowest of it. This is fascinating, just considering that when you're playing a game, when you're immersed in media, you're now mentally in a simulation, when you're already in a simulation from the spiritual perspective. And the more engaged you are in the material, in the cube, the further you are from the source, from ascension. Like entertainment, bread and circuses is a subset of government and mind control. And video games are a huge part of this, but it also serves as an interesting analogy for incarnation into a simulation or into a lower state of being. Because when you're playing the game, you're a person with free will, you can go anywhere, but for the duration of the game, you're adopting the limitations of the character in a simulation. And that character isn't you, but you control it. And the separation between your level of awareness and the game player that you represent is somewhat analogous to the concept of the higher self compared to the embodied, incarnate, egoic awareness self, like the lower self, higher self, or incarnated and transpersonal. It's like the player and the game character. And the game cube is a pretty fair analogy for the Gnostic prison. So in a way, people use the simulation theory or simulation language to describe this place, like the Matrix. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to use this analogy to try to get to try to understand what they're conveying to us. And I'm still gathering as many as I can examples of movies that portray the Gnostic myth as a subtext. And it's way too popular and it's way too consistent to be ignored. And that's another element to this whole thing. Like, in addition to reverse engineering fake history, I am very interested in deep diving into the esoteric subtext behind it all and what is actually being conveyed here. Because if you look at the way that traditionally this has worked, the reason why they put the stuff in your face is because you're hoodwinked and you can't see it. You don't have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, you're not initiated, it won't reach you. So in a way, it's almost a power move to be able to communicate above the perception of the mentally enslaved, the spiritually enslaved. Like in They Live, the guy puts on the glasses, he can see through it. He takes them off, he can't. But the people who are in control operate on a whole other level. And when you put the glasses on, you can see that the magazines, the billboards, the advertisements are giving you a completely different message, but nobody can see it. The controllers can. And that's another John Carpenter, another meta scripter. John Carpenter, James Cameron. We've been talking about these lately, these various directors. And maybe the next set of breakdowns I'll do after Elon Musk are the different movie directors that we consider to be meta scripters, and look at the consistencies between what they're putting into movies. All right, well, we've been up here for a couple hours. We'll be live likely tomorrow evening much sooner because I'm going to have a night shift starting at about 10 p.m. So I thought I would use tonight, really the last late night live stream. But, we always get better numbers earlier in the day. So thanks for your comments. We'll see you all in Discord or tomorrow.